Across the globe, justice systems are being reimagined through trauma-informed care, desistance theory, and neuroscience. At the forefront of this movement stands a voice for change, a trainer of professionals, and a storyteller committed to evidence-based reform. This is The Criminologist, the podcast exploring the people, the practices, and the possibilities shaping a more humane justice system. And now, please welcome the host of The Criminologist, Joseph Arvidson.
Hello and welcome to episode 228 of The Criminologist Podcast. I'm your host, Joseph Arvidson. Happy to have you with us today. If you've listened to our previous conversations with Dr. Jerrod Brown, you already know that he has a remarkable ability to make the invisible visible, to illuminate those often overlooked factors that shape how justice-involved individuals think, feel, and behave. Today, we are diving into a topic that sits at the cutting edge of neuroscience, mental health, and behavioral science, the gut-brain connection. That's right, we're talking about the role of the microbiota gut-brain axis and how it can impact everything from mood and cognition to impulse control and decision-making. You'll hear how something as seemingly mundane as diet, even the overconsumption of energy drinks or processed sugars, can affect a person's ability to regulate emotions, respond to feedback, or participate meaningfully in their own rehabilitation. We'll also discuss what this means for probation officers, case managers, and justice professionals seeking to better understand the internal challenges many clients face. This is about broadening our lens, moving beyond behavior alone, and asking deeper questions about what's driving that behavior, biologically and emotionally. Dr. Brown brings research, case examples, and practical takeaways that will help you rethink everything from your interview approach to your supervision strategies. So, if you're ready to explore how the gut influences the mind and why that matters for the work we do, let's get into it. Please enjoy my conversation with Dr. Jerrod Brown, and I'll see you all on the other side. Well, welcome back to the show, Jerrod. You are a frequent flyer here on the Criminologist Podcast. We love having you come on and share your views and update us all on what's going on in the world out there. One of the things I love about having you on the show is that your vision sort of aligns with the vision that I have as far as we need to continue to increase the aperture, if you will, of the lens by which we view our clientele, whether they're justice involved or even in the larger human services orbit, that we get so tunnel visioned, I think, sometimes, and we get really good at our particular specialty, whether in corrections, it's the risk-need responsivity model, or even if we broaden that lens and start looking at things like trauma, desistance, for example, the things we're looking at in the TIDES model, even incorporating, as you're well aware, the information around neuroscience, I think is another great step in the right direction. But today, my friend, you are going to introduce another topic to our listeners, which I am relatively certain will hear this interview and, as we've often done, say to ourselves, how have we been doing our jobs without having this tool in our toolbox, if you will? So, Jerrod, before we get into the topic du jour, I noted you've been on the show before, but for maybe first-time listeners or those who weren't fortunate enough to catch your previous episodes, go ahead, introduce yourself to the audience, tell us a little bit about yourself, what you're all about, and then we'll dive into this amazing topic today.
Thanks, Joe, for having me back. I know you have been busy, my friend, so keep up the great work and hope all of you are doing well. So my name's Jerrod. I am a professor. I teach a lot of classes at the graduate level, a little bit at the undergrad level. A lot of the classes I teach are related to like forensic, behavioral health, trauma-related classes, things of that nature. I do a lot of publishing, quite a bit of research, training, consultation, have a number of different degrees and certifications, and really trying to infuse the work of like forensic psychology, neurocriminology with integrative kind of behavioral health approaches, lifestyle medicine, nutritional neuroscience, gut health issues. And if you're working in any of the helping professions, you're working with clients that are probably not eating healthy. They probably don't sleep that well. They probably have a lot of gut health issues. And if you're asking yourself, like if you're a probation officer, why in the world would I want to care about my client's gut? Well, for example, when our gut is working at optimal levels, we have better energy. Our mood is better. Our skin is better. There's a big connection between the gut and the skin. So if someone has a lot of skin issues, look to the gut. It's not always going to be the gut, but if somebody has really poor brain functioning, they have a lot of mental health challenges. They're dealing with lots of trauma in their past, drug problems. They smoke cigarettes. The list goes on. They deal with a lot of stress. Pretty good chance your client's gut is not working at optimal levels, which if that's the case, all of those things can be made worse. So your client's mood may be more unstable, that they're not sleeping probably well, their stress management abilities go down. So someone has really bad gut functioning, that adversely impacts their resilience and their ability to bounce back. If you just look at the general statistics in the United States, take out anything related to the criminal justice system, mental health arena, you'll find some stats that say almost 75% of Americans experience digestive health symptoms on some level. Now you bring in mental health issues, chemical health issues, lots of criminal justice involvement. Where does that number go? It goes up. And you're probably talking near 100% of your clients are going to be dealing with gut health issues. And if you look at the research too, gut health issues are one of the 4 primary reasons why people in general go to their doctor. The other 3 is going to be chronic daytime fatigue, nighttime sleep issues, and chronic pain. Digestive health issues make all of them worse. So a frontline intervention, if someone's dealing with chronic daytime fatigue, pain issues, sleep issues, also target the gut to optimize it. So I know, Joe, today we're going to be talking about the gut and psychogastroenterology. That's kind of the arm of interventions that can be used by qualified professionals. And we'll talk about why it's so important, I think, for all the helping professions to learn about psychogastroenterology. It's a term that most people probably haven't heard of. There's more and more studies coming out on that. Just to give you folks just a broad overview of psychogastroenterology, if you just Google search that, you might see it referred to as gastrointestinal psychology. You want to learn about the gut-brain axis when studying this topic. If you have ever studied like health psychology, this is a topic that may come up in that branch of literature from time to time. Therapists, licensed professionals who have specialized training in this area, you would be doing like brain gut psychotherapies. Joe, I know you have a lot of training with CBT. There's a whole protocol for basically GI-informed cognitive behavioral therapy that qualified professionals can use to not just target the mood instability, the negative thinking, all of those things, but doing it simultaneously by also understanding the gut. And if you can target the brain-based impairments, a lot of times you can improve the gut. Psychoeducation is talked about under this umbrella. Just providing people education about these things can be very helpful. Stress management, relaxation training, improving psychological flexibility. We'll talk about all these things. So that's kind of a really broad snapshot of psychogastroenterology that, before I kick it back to you, Joe, I just wanted everyone to just kind of have a general understanding about before we get a lot deeper in the weeds.
Yeah, that was amazing. And I was taking a lot of notes here, and I can't wait to unpack some of these things. What I love, Jerrod, having you on and others, is sometimes we go through life with these sort of truisms, if you will, or expressions we've heard since we were little kids. And then we hear the science behind it. We think, oh, that's why grandma said that or whatever. For example, what I'm getting to is, how often have we heard that term, oh man, just trust your gut, just trust your gut. What's the science behind that? And or can you maybe unpack like, well, there's a reason we say that, because again, we're now understanding the relationship between the gut, the mind, our instincts, that type of thing. I know we do a lot in our tied supervision model, talking about when we talk about the neuroscience, and we've appropriated a lot from Dr. Bruce Perry and his neurosequential model, but we tell folks, okay, we've got to get individuals out of their amygdala and up into the prefrontal cortex. So yeah, I guess what I'm asking you, Jerrod, is maybe unpack where that old expression of, well, trust your gut, like, yeah, that's actually rooted in some of the science behind this that we're discovering.
Well, I think let's start with Hippocrates. We all know him, the father of modern medicine, Greek physician. He was around like 400 BC. And if you look and just Google some of his famous quotes, and some of his quotes are, death sits in the bowels. Bad digestion is the root of all evils. We all know this one. Let food be thy medicine, and medicine be thy food. And he also said, walking is man's best medicine. So these are all things I study now, but none of this is new. Like when we're talking about like integrative behavioral health, I mean, Hippocrates was talking about these things long time ago. So basically, most diseases, illnesses, and disorders originate in the gut. And when we think about the gut, what do we need to be aware of? The gut-brain axis. A lot of time, we probably heard that, the gut microbiome, those kind of things. But the gut-brain axis, think of it as a two-way highway between the gut and the brain. So it's a bidirectional biochemical signaling process that goes on between what's going on in the gut, what's going on in the brain. So the gut-brain axis encompasses the central nervous system. Joe, you went through the neurocriminology training. We had a whole module on the central nervous system. If you want to understand criminal behavior, look at the research on the central nervous system and the autonomic nervous system. The HPA axis is part of this gut-brain axis. The HPA axis is the hypothalamus pituitary adrenal axis. What the world is that? It's our body's main stress response system. So if you ever feel really stressed out, you're up half the night cramming for a final, or you're drinking energy shots all day long, you're skipping meals, you're shaky, maybe you feel a little heated, you're just so tired. Your HPA axis is not working properly. For most clients with extensive, really challenging backgrounds, their HPA axis is not working properly. The end product of the HPA axis is cortisol. Look at the literature on cortisol and sleep, but cortisol relates to all kinds of other things. People are surprised to learn this too. This goes right to the heart of your question, Joe. The gut has its own nervous system. It's called the enterotic nervous system. There's lots of things going on in our guts. Lots of hormones being produced, different kinds of chemicals, and all kinds, just trillions of different things going on in the gut. We probably all heard about like probiotics and prebiotics and things like that. That's outside the scope of today's training. But basically, in a nutshell, if the gut-brain axis is off, that impacts our mood, our physical health, all kinds of other things. It can impact even cognitive performance. So someone's got like really fuzzy thinking and their memory's off and they're just slow to react. That could be a gut issue in some cases. So communication between the gut and the brain happen through the gut microbiota. So learning about the gut microbiota is very, very important. And again, learning about the nervous system, the autonomic, the central nervous system, our immune system, our neuroendocrine health, which is basically like hormones and things like that. Hormones are our body's Wi-Fi. Hormones are off. The connections between our bodies are not working properly. Hormonal dysfunction, really fascinating forensic literature and neurocriminology literature related to that. I threw out the term the gut microbiota to all of you. What is that? Just in case you haven't heard about that. Think of it as a superorganism. It's a complex ecosystem where there's trillions of microorganisms living in our gut. Some of them are good. Some of them are bad. Look at the literature, and I'm not knocking any kind of medications and things like that, but certain medications that clients are on can absolutely impact that. It's part of the gut-brain axis. It's a biometabolic interconnecting network where it communicates again with the gut and the brain. It's not working properly. It creates more physiological imbalances in our body, which then can adversely impact brain health, our behavior, our mood, our sleep, our metabolism. If someone's trying to lose weight and they can never lose weight and they're doing all the right things, look at the gut. Work with a doctor, a functional medicine provider. The gut might not be working at proper levels. If you're getting sick all the time and you have immunity issues, most of our immunity is in our gut. Our gut microbiota also influences our temperament as well and our circadian rhythm. So really, really fascinating stuff. Joe, that's a little overview about the gut-brain axis.
That was great, Jerrod. I'm wondering, you said something earlier that really caught my attention when you mentioned GI-informed CBT or cognitive behavioral therapies. Maybe circle back to that. I'm wondering if there's a listener out there who has embraced the cognitive behavioral model. They're doing that with their clients, and they just heard you talk about GI-informed CBT. What is something that they could maybe in their daily practice after listening to this episode, leverage some knowledge or operationalize a little bit of this? Is there a takeaway that they could, again, suggest to a client, or again, how would they embrace that or become a little bit more GI informed, I guess is the expression I would use?
Yeah, so if you look at the psychogastroenterology literature, most of the true bigwigs in that arena who have published indicate the folks that do that kind of work are typically going to be licensed psychologists, sometimes maybe licensed clinical social workers, other mental health providers, medical doctors, allied fields of study who have proper licenses, credentials, training, education in this area. There is nothing stopping anyone, in my opinion, from becoming psychogastroenterology informed. You might not be licensed, but it's not going to hurt a police officer, a corrections officer, a social worker, a case manager, a probation officer to learn about these kinds of things. What do you do? Well, maybe today's step one. You're getting introduced to some of the terms. Step two, dig into the literature, understand the research, maybe purchase some of the books that have been published on this. I'm not affiliated with the Rome Foundation, but they are kind of the big wigs in the world that you would want to go to. They offer a number of different trainings, resources, great information, the Rome Foundation. And then after you feel like you have a really good, solid sense of this stuff, maybe during your intake process, you're more mindful of different gut health issues. Again, you may not be doing the work per se, but if you're using skills, you're understanding the red flag indicators, you're partnering with other providers who are truly doing this work and have the proper credentials and forming a multidisciplinary team, that's the way to go. That's what I would have to say about that. But now back to your question with the CBT. Cognitive behavioral therapy that targets kind of gut health issues, GI disorders, gastrointestinal disorders. What are they doing? How does that relate to improving gut functioning? Start with catastrophizing. If that client catastrophizes, if they're perseverating, if they're ruminating, that's not just impacting their brain. That revs up the whole system, and you are starting to adversely impact the gut. So if you can help a client reduce that all or nothing thinking, if you have a client that is so rigid and they have such great difficulty having flexible, adaptable thinking, their resilience is probably very low. Their problem-solving abilities is low. The way they handle stress is not good. So helping that client become more chill, more relaxed, more calm, not going from 0 to 60 in a second. This is good stuff for anger management programs. Clients that have anger management issues, they're going to have gut health issues. Of course they are. You rev up your system and you're starting to yell and scream at people, your whole body's impacted. If you have a client who has a high level of fear, maybe it's from trauma, look at the literature on medical trauma. If that client has an extreme level of fear, maybe of symptoms, let's pretend it's a client who has profound gut health issues and they have just profound constipation. They might have a huge fear going to the bathroom. Or maybe you have a client that has irritable bowel syndrome or something like that, and they have a fear of going to the bathroom in public, or they're in a group meeting and they have a huge trauma reaction to some gut health issues. Maybe the client is very hypervigilant. A lot of you are probably familiar with that through the trauma literature, but just, again, calming the brain, calming the body down, increasing psychological flexibility can be very, very helpful. Cognitive behavioral therapy can do that. Acceptance and commitment therapy can play a role in this. Compassion-focused therapy, if you look at this literature, helping your clients build greater levels of resilience. Working on solution-focused interventions, or just teaching your clients very healthy boundaries. In this literature of psychogastroenterology, it does talk about targeting all of those areas. Joe, I can go deeper in the weeds, but that would be a good starting point to think of.
Jerrod, I've made note you've now mentioned the term resilience 3 times, and my ears perk up whenever you hear that word resilience, because as you're aware, Jerrod, as a member of our TIDES advisory board, resiliency is actually one of the pillars of change in our TIDES model, along with self-regulation, identity, and social support. So that's why my ears perked up. Whenever I hear resilience, I think that's an understood, excuse my grammar, people don't understand the value of augmenting a client's resiliency. So maybe connect those dots between resiliency, gut health, because I'm all about building up an individual's resiliency, because I know it leads to trauma recovery. I know it augments the desistance process. Maybe talk about how an understanding of, I'll try to pronounce it here, psychogastroenterology can help in my crusade to build resiliency.
Yeah, so resilience, when I give talks on resilience, I always kind of just talk about it, think about it as like a force field around that person. Things are coming at you. You know, you may get knocked down a little bit, but resilience helps you get back up. You're not invincible, but you're more flexible. You're more bendable. Again, another analogy would be you're looking outside in the summer and there's a storm, and a tree has good resilience for the most part. because it can be bendable and flexible and the branches are moving. If those branches were stiff, a major windstorm would crack those branches and knock that tree down almost every time. Resilience helps with that. So from a brain gut psychotherapy and other kinds of intervention approach, learning about CBT and how it's modified for gut health issues, problem-focused interventions. I actually have a lot of training in problem-solving therapy. Folks can Google that. It's an evidence-based practice that a certain university offers a certification on. You can just Google problem-solving therapy. We all probably know about positive psychological interventions. That does come up in this literature as well through a psychogastroenterology lens. That's good for anybody. But if you can help your client develop a greater sense of gratitude, optimism, self-control, self-compassion, enhance their self-esteem, and help them have greater levels of self-efficacy, what are you doing? You're helping their brain work better, but you're also helping their gut work better. So that gut-brain axis, they're working off each other in a very positive way. Maybe some of your clients really struggle with self-management. So helping clients learn improved self-management skills can be very helpful. Of course, working with a qualified specialist. Maybe it's a registered dietitian. Maybe it's a nutritionist. Maybe it's an exercise specialist. Or you're just noticing your client has some very poor lifestyle practices. So maybe your client reports to you, they're laying around all day long and they don't get up. They're watching TV all day long, and one hand's a cigarette and another hand's a candy bar. Look at all of those lifestyle changes that could be areas for targeting. Sedentary behavior, screen time exposure reduction, tobacco prevention, nutritional interventions. Those are just 4 things that come up right then and there. Maybe on top of that, the client's just sitting there all day long doing these things because social isolation, loneliness, maybe they have social anxiety and they just don't like leaving their house because they have a fear of whatever. Getting that client connected to a counselor, a therapist. It could be face-to-face. It could be online. It could be through telehealth services. So all of these things are interconnected. And if you look at this from a holistic lens, what are some practical things, again, we could do? Well, help your client reduce sedentary behaviors. Maybe you know your client is sitting there all day long, sipping on sodas, but your client doesn't ever have any water. Well, what does that mean? Well, we're probably talking about low-grade dehydration, which that in and of itself impacts brain health, impacts gut health. You know your client is on the screen all day long and they don't sleep at night, and they're watching really anxiety-provoking things right up until bedtime. A target area would be maybe to educate the client. Maybe let's try to get off that screen an hour or 2 before bedtime. Another thing we don't think about, body posture. That's a whole nother area. If you know your client is laying around all the time or they're slouched over all the time, that can actually impact brain health and gut health. Getting your client, and I'm biased, but I think all clients in the criminal justice system should be working with a licensed nutritionist and registered dietitian as well. I'm working on another degree right now, and hopefully by the end of this summer, if everything goes as planned, I'll have completed another degree in applied clinical nutrition. I've been doing more talks on that, and there's such a big connection between what we eat and our brain and gut health. Maybe you know your client lives right across the street from a busy freeway or a factory, or they live in a rundown house and they're exposed to a lot of environmental contaminants, lead, mercury, air pollution, another big variable to consider. And another just practical thing we want to be aware of, that's a good area for targeted intervention, is health literacy. If you know your client has low levels of health literacy, what will that tell you? They're probably less likely to brush their teeth and go to the dentist. They're less likely to cook their own meals, so they might be more likely to go to the gas station and get some processed meals or go through the drive-thru or order takeout, which is, the food tastes great. It's terrible for your body. People low levels of health literacy may not know how to read a label, so they don't know what all these ingredients mean. They may not know how to make a meal. They're less likely to stay medication compliant, so really focusing on that as well. And from a brain-based lens too, practical strategies to consider if you know your client has got a lot of brain-based problems. Maybe they're dealing with a lot of nervous system dysregulation. If you can target that by default, you're actually helping their gut work better as well. So what do we do about that? Well, educate yourself as a practitioner about the nervous system, help your client build resilience, focusing on movement-based interventions. Again, maybe you're not an exercise physiologist, but maybe it's nudging your client to get up more. Maybe get up every hour on the hour, set a timer, move around a little bit more, encouraging your client to eat healthier foods. You're not setting up your own individual dietary plan, but if you know your client is eating gas station food and fast food all day long, a gentle nudge would be, well, would you ever consider, could I refer you to a registered dietitian or licensed nutritionist? Educate your client about sleep health, sleep hygiene practices. Most clients in the criminal justice system have sleep issues. I gave a couple talks on this recently to a different group. More and more research is finding chronic sleep issues and circadian rhythm misalignment may be neurobiological factors associated with some instances of criminality. Deep breathing, great for the brain, great for the gut. Mindfulness-based interventions, music therapy, art therapy, getting out in nature more. So if that client, another interesting screening question or an intake question that maybe we don't think about, just ask your client, tell me about your day-to-day life. And that might open up the door that you start learning that this client predominantly lives in an indoor environment all the time. So they're not getting out and getting fresh air. Maybe they live in a basement and they have block windows. They're not getting natural sunlight. That can throw off their circadian rhythms, which that in and of itself can impact the gut. So just nudging your client, even get outside for 1 minute a day. Next week, 2 minutes. The week after, 3 minutes. Getting out of your house is important because you're breathing in the same air over and over again. Very, very important. Self-compassion, I mentioned that briefly before. I think that's a fantastic intervention we don't think about enough because the research has found people with higher levels of self-compassion are more likely to exercise. They have higher levels of resilience, lower levels of stress. It's a great way to combat shame, anxiety, and depression. If somebody has chronic pain issues, higher levels of self-compassion can bring down inflammation in the body and actually help you cope with pain more effectively. Self-compassion is directing kindness inward. So if you have a client that doesn't talk very nice about themselves and they have a high level of shame, a great antidote to that is teaching self-compassion. Joe, I'll kick it back to you, buddy.
You mentioned lifestyle practices earlier, Jerrod, and then rattled off some of those manifestations, some of those behaviors rather associated with that, like a sedentary lifestyle or too much screen time. And of course, our clients' diets. And I was listening through the lens of, let's say, for example, a enthusiastic practitioner who's embraced our risk, need, responsivity model. I've been involved a lot with both assessment training, risk assessment training, as well as then linking the results of that risk assessment to our case planning endeavors. And as you were speaking, I thought, boy, even somebody who may think they're at their top of their game. They're following the playbook. They're not going to look at or ask questions around a client's sedentary lifestyle or screen time and I'm sort of indicting myself as a trainer. I've never looked at sleep with clients or trained probation and parole officers to really consider that. That's what I was saying earlier. We get so focused on our sort of piece of the pie, which for a lot of probation officers, it's those central 8 criminogenic risk factors. Let's focus on those and hope for good things, which we'll get. But, the more we learn, the more we realize, well, when we don't get the efficacy, when we don't get those success rates, it's because there's so much of these other things going on that we're neglecting, such as, do you live in a food desert? Are you eating gas station food and takeout food? And then I wonder why my cognitive behavioral interventions aren't landing like Joe told me they were going to land. It's like I said to kick off this interview, Jerrod, we just need to broaden that lens of how we view our clients and, look to the left, look to the right at what our partners are doing and assess that individual holistically.
I love it. Yes. Think about what your client is putting into their body. Who are they associating with? What are their thinking patterns like? That gives you a more holistic understanding. So thinking about what they're putting in their body, what food are they eating? There's plenty of research literature that shows that excessive energy drink consumption triggers anxiety, nervousness, insomnia, gut health problems. You said it without saying it, food insecurity. Several studies found that food insecurity adversely impacts the gut-brain axis. Think about all the things that can weaken our immune system. High levels of stress, anxiety, tobacco use, malnutrition, social isolation, obesity, not taking care of your dental health. These are all things that impact the gut. If your immune system's off, what is the hub of immunity? The gut. Optimize the gut. We know that most people in prison who come out have a huge, high degree of health disparities. Any kind of health disparities impacts the gut. Social isolation, discrimination, racism, stigma, all of these things impact our mood, impact our gut. The list goes on and on. So the more, holistically we can look at this, it's a big puzzle. We're not asking anyone to know all of these topics, but the more you can understand the basics of them and you recognize these patterns in your clients, that's when you can pick up the phone or shoot an email to a service provider who may have a specialty in sleep, who may have a specialty in this or that. So again, piecing it together as part of an integrative, holistic, multidisciplinary informed team is the way to go. And Joe, push back on me if you disagree with this, but the criminal justice as a whole in the United States doesn't have a good track record in terms of when people get out. Look at the research on how many folks who get out of prison end up back in prison within a few years after release. The majority, right? I think the statistics are. Yeah.
Oh, it's insane. Yeah, it's insane.
What would happen if we do take this holistic, integrative approach? I don't know what would happen, but I'd like to think that number we'd see a dramatic improvements. And I'm not knocking any halfway house or any inpatient treatment program, but I've had enough clients go to these programs. You go there, you eat all this processed food, you're loading up on the sugar, you may be sober from alcohol or drugs, but now you're addicted to food, you're addicted to tobacco, you're addicted to sugar. That's all thrown off the gut. It's throwing off our blood sugar levels. It's driving up the inflammation. I mean, all of these things, if you understand this literature, is not good for long-term success for many of these clients.
Let me ask Jerrod. So I've got a listener out there who is bought in on this, but let's say, for example, they or their agency simply don't have the capacity to, as you've noted, team up with a dietitian or refer somebody to a sleep specialist. What are maybe just one or two things that the individual practitioner can do on their own to incorporate some of this knowledge? For example, you mentioned some screening questions or some intake questions, or I mentioned formulation of a case plan. Is it something as simple as seeing a client walk in every day with a Snicker bar or a bottle of Mountain Dew, asking like, hey, have you thought about cutting down on sugar? Or simply asking, did you get a good night's sleep last night? Simply being aware of this. You said something earlier which I couldn't agree with more, when you said that we're not asking folks to be therapists. I know this is something that I've dealt with when trying to push individuals to be trauma informed. And sometimes we get that resistance from the practitioner. Hey, Joe, I'm not a therapist. Hey, Joe, that's not my job. Hey, I'm not a therapist. Okay, I'm not saying you need to be a therapist, but again, just being trauma informed, trauma aware goes a long way. So in that vein of just being psychogastroenterology aware or informed, like I said, somebody sitting at their desk in Indiana wants to start incorporating some of this knowledge when they get to their desk on Monday morning. One or two practical things they can do on their own without making major agency changes, for example.
Come informed, become educated, spend just a little time every week reading up on this stuff. Starting there, the more you can be equipped and informed on this, you're going to be in a better spot. Practically speaking, think about this. If your program, whatever you do, has a vending machine there, and that vending machine is just loaded with pop and candy, people are not going to be happy with me, but maybe starting to offer just a fewer healthy food items. Maybe offering a psychoeducation class to the clients. All right, how does sugar relate to drug and alcohol relapse? It absolutely does. How does sugar impact sleep? How does sugar impact the gut? Maybe you're not equipped to do that, but finding a provider, finding an expert out there who could zoom in and give a brief 30-minute talk to your group. Start there. Look at your intake packet. Sit down with your team. Are you asking about sugar-sweetened beverages? Are you asking about sleep health? Are you asking about digestive health complaints? Again, you're not diagnosing, but it would probably be nice to know if your client is dealing with chronic diarrhea, if they are dealing with chronic constipation, if they consistently feel bloated, or if they consistently feel extreme pain in their gut. Because if you look at this research, if clients dealing with these gut health issues and they go unaddressed, that can drive the bus up with shame and stigma, fatigue, loneliness, worry. And it is kind of a medical trauma depending on the severity of this too. So looking at it through a trauma-informed lens would not be a bad idea, in my opinion.
And I mentioned what could the individual practitioner do, but to your point, I've always thought that the individuals that run our correctional facilities, those wardens, those superintendents, they do have that power and that authority, like you just said, to control the sugar in those diets and get a better handle on what we're feeding those residents of our facilities, and just being more mindful of that. Just as we're looking at, for example, getting into dynamic security, and we're actually now even looking at the architecture that we use in building jails and prisons, being more mindful of that. We need to keep that trend going and just be more mindful of the diet that we do control for individuals who are incarcerated.
I've heard this enough from folks who work in settings like that, is sometimes the clients who have good behavior are rewarded with sugar and sweets and treats. And, on the surface, it seems like a really good thing. But if you do understand this research, it really is doing that client a disservice at the biochemical level, which then impacts their gut and their mood. And the list goes on. There's a whole line of research literature out there that I think is underappreciated. And it talks about health promoting correctional institutions. Some institutions are doing good with this, some are not, but it's really promoting that confinement setting to promote better eating, better lighting, better movement. And what they have found when they do that, inmates are happier. Behavioral infractions go down. So maybe in the future, Joe, looking at an episode on health promoting correctional and even in the community, like halfway houses and probation centers. I mean, it can trickle down everywhere. And again, if you're still wondering, like, I'm supervising high-risk offenders, why in the world do I care about if they have fast food or that? Well, just Google that. Just countless studies are talking about this stuff now that date back many, many decades. It's out there. But we're not trained in this. My school programs, unless you're really looking for it, you're not getting training on this stuff in a criminal justice degree program or even just a general psychology program.
No, not even close. In fact, the more I learn, a lot of it I learned from you, my friend, about a variety of topics. I continue to ask myself as a now former retired practitioner, oh my goodness, if I only knew then what I do now, whether it was around trauma, whether it was around desistance, whether it was around, well, neuroscience, but now even the gut-brain health stuff. I think we just really need to continue empowering the practitioner and giving them a full set of tools to do the very, very hard job that they do. Speaking of neuroscience, I got a great email from a friend and colleague of mine over in Romania a week or two ago, Professor Iwan Dernescu, asking about your becoming a neurocriminology informed practitioner program, which I turned him on to. Hopefully he's registered and underway, but give a shout out as long as we're talking about expanding the lens that we view our clients through. Give a shout out about your neurocriminology informed program.
Well, those training programs are through APHIS, the American Institute for the Advancement of Forensic Studies. So those are online, continuing, more just pre-recorded modules that can lead to a certification as a neurocriminology-informed professional. And in that training series, I talk about a lot of these topics. And I'm actually in the early stages of developing another certification program, kind of using that template as a model for psychogastroenterology informed professionals. Because as far as I know, there's not any programs out there that specifically provide training to like the non-psychologist, the non-mental health professional. And again, we're not saying you're going to be doing this work as a certified licensed psychogastroenterologist, but if you're informed about the skills, you're more aware of these things and you can partner with other providers. So early stages of that, hopefully launch that at some point in the next numerous months. But as far as I know too, Joe, and I could be wrong on this, I've never seen any training or any literature that talks about psychogastroenterology within the context of the forensic, legal, criminal justice systems, even though if you follow the research literature on gut health issues, there are more and more articles now coming out that it's important to look at the gut when we're maybe starting to understand criminal behavior, problematic behavior in a more holistic manner. You'll see more and more studies on this, I think, as the months and years go on.
I just love, Jerrod, how you tear down those silos between, those learning silos, those professional silos, and we're almost giving license to the practitioner. It's okay to get out of your lane a little bit, because the client doesn't care what lane you're in, right? Their issues, their problems need resolving, regardless of who the practitioner's employer is. I've often referenced the fact that a high-risk justice-involved individual can visit their probation officer on Monday, and on Tuesday they may see a mental health professional, and on Wednesday they may go to a chemical dependency therapist, and on Thursday they could talk to somebody to discuss their traumas, and I could go on, but there's just such a disconnect between those individuals. And I've always said, if they're all singing from the same song sheet, we're going to serve our clients a lot better. And as I said, you're doing a good job of tearing down those rigid, well, that's not my job, that's not my lane. Well, again, just to be informed of what they're doing in the other lanes goes so far.
Yeah, let's put a bridge and connect all these lanes together where we're working collaboratively.
Right. I mean, I would hate myself to see a professional, even say my medical doctor, and him saying, well, that's not my department, Joe. You got to get your insurance card out and go see a dietitian, go see a mental health therapist, go see a whomever, right? I would just feel so marginalized if somebody took that stance, but that's what we do when we tell our criminal justice involved folks, well, I'm not a therapist, I'm not a dietitian, that's not my problem. Yet wonder why we're not succeeding, because we don't consider all these other variables.
I agree. Spot on, my friend.
Jerrod, I love having you on the show because I learned so much. And when you were rattling off that program, I was having a Rodney Dangerfield moment again, thinking, oh, I've got to go back to school yet again, Jerrod, and collect another certificate from you, my friend. But it's always a pleasure to learn. And thank you for pushing me in the right direction.
You're welcome. Thank you for having me back. I appreciate you. And thank you, everyone, for listening.
All right. Until next time, Jerrod, be well, my friend.
You too.
That was Dr. Jerrod Brown, once again offering a wealth of insight at the intersection of neuroscience, behavioral health, and justice practice. There is a growing understanding in our field that what we often call non-compliance or poor decision making may actually be signals of something deeper, something physiological. The gut, for example, isn't just about digestion. It houses nearly 70% of the body's immune system and plays a critical role in regulating mood, focus, and even memory. When the gut is out of sync, everything from emotional regulation to cognitive clarity can be compromised. But Jerrod just didn't stop at biology. His work reminds us that resilience isn't just about bouncing back. It's about access to health, to stability, to relationships that buffer stress and build capacity. And that brings us squarely to the role of social isolation. Because it's hard to self-regulate in a vacuum. It's hard to find meaning, identity, or hope when connection is scarce. And yet, this is where we do our work. As practitioners, we're not just accountability agents. We are co-regulators, bridge builders, context holders. Our responsibility isn't just to respond to behavior, but to understand its roots, to ask what's happening beneath the surface, and to help clients build self-regulation, not just compliance. So whether you're supervising individuals, shaping policy, or training the next generation of practitioners, carry this lens with you. One that sees biology, behavior, and environment as intertwined. One that makes space for healing and not just punishment. And one that understands change as a process that's both relational and resilient. Thanks again to Dr. Jerrod Brown for his thoughtful contributions. And thank you, as always, for being part of the movement to humanize justice and deepen our understanding of what real change requires. Until next time, stay curious, stay compassionate, keep leading with insight, and always remember, folks, there's no them, there's only us.
Joe, I know you have a lot of training with CBT. There's a whole protocol for basically GI-informed cognitive behavioral therapy that qualified professionals can use to not just target the mood instability, the negative thinking, all of those things, but doing it simultaneously by also understanding the gut. And if you can target the brain-based impairments, a lot of times you can improve the gut.
The Criminologist Podcast is a production of the Paragon Group, LLC. For speaking engagements, training opportunities, program design, or interview requests, visit theparagongroup.llc.com. To learn more about the TIDES supervision model, a trauma-informed, desistance-based approach to community supervision, please visit the TIDESLLC.com. If you enjoyed today's episode, be sure to check out the Criminologist YouTube channel for additional content, including exclusive video interviews and international insights. Both the Criminologist Podcast and the Criminologist channel are brought to you by the Criminologist Media Group. Don't forget to give the show a 5-star review. And as always, thank you for listening.